It's a really interesting process that Alpha goes through to provide data from a lookup grid back into a UX component. And with a little bit of effort, it's not too tough at all. But you can actually take over the select link that Alpha provides, and in a sense, kind of put your own stuff in there, and then continue on and follow Alpha's rules. And the nice thing about this is that Alpha follows its own rules. So because they do that, you can kind of mix things up a bit. I don't know if you really if this is really advisable to do, but it's they let you do it, which isn't always the best idea, but still it's not too bad. So let's have a look at see what this is doing. So here we are in a UX component, and I've defined a lookup grid for this field. This is my customer ID field. So this is coming from a SQL database. So I'm going to click on this, and there's our grid, and there's Alpha's select statement. So that's great. Now normally on Alpha stuff that you would click this, and you'd get the value of whatever you asked for. And in this case, I'm asking for customer ID. Return back into return back into the UX component into the field. So in this case, I'm going to click on customer ID number 6. So I'm getting a message out here, hey, we're in a grid executing code, which is what we're doing. And you can do AJAX callbacks, whatever you want to do. So now I'm going to click OK, and 6 is brought back into the UX component for me, just as it normally would be. So what's actually happening here? So let's go and have a look at this. So here's our rendered stuff, and here is, and let's inspect the element here. So what's going on here? So here's it looks like every one of these rows is put into a table, so that's cool. And here is here's our link. There's our select link right here, and we can see that there's an on-click event going on. So what's the on-click event? It's dlg1.grid.custom.grid object. So this gives us an indication that this is a grid.object placeholder. So that's good. We need that information. And so look what's here. This is an interesting method that Alpha has, a lookup grid select row. Really interesting. Okay, so what is that doing for us? Well, it's taking the dialogue 1, which is our starting dialogue. We're up here, we started from. It's got the customer ID, so that's the value that I think that's the field that we're returning information back into. And then O is, let's call that overwrite. No idea. And then look at this. This is so it's a static number that Alpha places in for each one of these links. So that's the value that I asked for, the customer ID value, when I set this up as a lookup grid. So if I were to look at number 4, let's inspect that one. So here we are. Here's there's 4. So that's being returned. Then there's a return false. So that's good. So this is a really interesting on-click event going on for this link. So knowing that, one thing that I thought we could try, we'll go into our lookup definition, is and Alpha allows this in so many different places. Sometimes you don't get to do it. A lot of times you do get to do it. All Alpha wants here is the label for your select, for the word that's going to be turned into a link. It could be click here, it could be whatever it does. It doesn't matter. And by default, it's simply the word select. But in this particular case, you can wrap stuff around that select, which is very cool. And what we're going to do is make it look very much like what Alpha has going on. We're going to set up a link. We're going to do an on-click event, but we're going to call our own function, my function. There's our class. So, this looks very much like this. doesn't it? We don't have a return false in there. We don't need it there, but very, very much like. So now, so we've got that set up. So let's go and have a look at what that looks like. So let's pop back in here. So what have we got here? We've got, let me re-render this. No, it doesn't matter. So there's alpha statement. So that's great. And look what's down here. This is our statement. And it's in the same line. So what happens? We've got two links going on in the same element virtually, kind of. So what happens is our information takes precedence over alpha's. So alpha's on-click event is not going to run. Our on-click event is going to run, which is very cool. So it's kind of cheating, and we're taking over from what alpha is doing, but okay. So now let's go and pop into the grid. So here's our grid. Nice little stuff going on. And remember that we are calling a function called myFunction. So let's go into JavaScript functions. There's our function in our grid. There's our message. Hey, we're in a grid executing code. And we've got a little set timeout function going on here because we're executing JavaScript here. So that's going to execute immediately on the client side. But we're clicking on a row. So we've got to give alpha for a fraction of a second to catch up and set the row. So we've got to do a little set timeout for 1/100th of a second, and that gives alpha enough time to catch up and set the selected row. So now we can go and get this row, the row that we're on, whatever we clicked on. We're going to go and get the value of whatever we're looking for, whatever we set up to look for in the first place. I want to go after customer ID, so I'm going after the value of the customer ID in this particular row, the current row that I've just clicked on. And then look what I'm doing. I'm calling alpha's function that they were calling before, that we're overriding. Now I'm going to call it lookup grid select row, and I'm passing back exactly the same stuff that alpha's passing back, including the O, which I have no idea what it is, and I'm passing in the current value that I just went and got. And I'm doing a return false. Very cool stuff. And here, that you remember what that looked like before? This DLG1 under bar grid, under bar custom, and all this other stuff. This grid object gave us a clue as to what we needed to do here. So we just simply put in a placeholder, and that resolves into the correct grid name so we can reference it. So this gets executed 100th of a second after we click. Everything's set for the row by that time. We go and grab our own values and just return. But up here, we've gone and done whatever we want to. Now, if you're doing an AJAX callback here, at the end of the AJAX callback, of course, you're going to have to run this. So you'll have to include it in the AJAX callback and not here. But the point is that you can run this stuff and kind of overtake alpha's select link statement and get done whatever else you need to get done. And then return your value normally using alpha's stuff, which is very, very cool in itself. So that's it. Thanks for having a look.